Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the August 7th edition of the DAACAT. Glad to have you on board. Got myself, Jim McDermott, with a pitcher of corn behind me, but Paige is remote in the field, and looking like we've got a cold morning because we've got a coat, practically a parka on, but no stocking hat. So at least, Paige, you got by without a frost this morning at your
chilly up your
location. Downright chilly, but no frost, so that's what we want. So we'll jump right in, and as we go here, we'll let Paige describe where she's at and what she's got going in the background there. As usual, we'll start off with a trivia question. Hold on a second here. I'm got a lot of people flying into the lobby, so I'm getting people admitted. As far as the agenda, we're going to be doing a lot of the same format, some updates. Of course, current topics is what we're all about, so we'll talk about what's currently going on. Frost updates is not a current frost as of this morning, so we're good there, but we'll talk about some of the black layer dates and frost dates and how we're looking as far as the late planting. A few things, of course, still going on out in the field, and August has actually been a crazy month as far as diseases, insects, mainly aphids coming on, and of course now we're actually getting to see a lot of what's happening as far as ear fill, pod fill, and getting close to maybe making some estimates on what type of yield potential we have. And we'll finish with a spotlight product. But the trivia question for this morning is around soybean aphids, something that near and dear to everyone's heart this time of the year, and one of those fun things that we get to continue to scout for. But as far as scouting and treatments, when are we able to say we're done on the year? What growth stage in soybeans is the point where we can stop worrying about soybean aphids? We've got R6 by Eric Foret, and that is a acceptable answer. And I say acceptable because there's a range. It's usually considered R5 to R6, but we'll gladly take that. So I've got R5.5, but in the official literature, you'll see R5.5 to R6. And we'll talk a little bit more about soybean aphids and corn aphids a little later on down the line. So before we jump into too much, I guess, Paige, maybe you, from your remote location, talk a little bit about what you've got behind you and some of the plots you have going on there.
Yeah. I'm a little nervous. I saw a badger cross the road, so if I look distracted and take off running, no.
You got a shovel with you, don't you? Always got to have a shovel when you're in a cornfield.
I have my spade. I don't leave home without it. But no,
Good.
I'm at a pretty extensive plot in central Iowa. As far as behind me is a 2-row plot. I do have 98 day to 117 day in it. Kind of down the way a little bit is a Precion corn plot, and then even further down a regular FTN plot. So yeah, typically at this time of year, and what I'll be doing today is looking at the plant health side of things. I am finding some tar spot and some southern corn rust, but a lot going on in the fields this time of year.
Yeah, no doubt about that. And I know you have some leaves pulled, and we tried to take a look. It's a little tough to see pulling
I don't
the leaf
know
up to the camera.
Yeah, it's probably a little too difficult, but did find some southern rust here. The tar spot we'll get into a little more, but right now I'm just finding some little specks of stromata embedded in the leaf here or there, mainly in that bottom canopy, a little bit in the mid. But yes, I do have my rain jacket on. It's actually really dewy. The grass out here is really dewy. When you get in the corn, it's in the mid to upper canopy though, where the majority of the dew is.
Mm-hmm. Well, and we all know dew is very conducive to several diseases.
Yes.
Rust, star spot, of course, being a couple of the key ones. All right, we're going to jump into really our first topic, and yeah, as you're going, Paige, if you have things you want to add,
Yeah,
from the field, we'll continue to do that. GDU update, and this would be using Storm Lake as a location and using a 108-day hybrid as far as black layer dates. So it's been interesting watching GDUs. It always is, but it's varied throughout Northwest Iowa. Some areas actually have been slightly below normal. Some areas above normal, like Storm Lake. Generally, areas, I would say Highway 3 and south have been running ahead of normal. But this is pretty significant. And of course, we're coming off a fairly hot week last week, pretty high nighttime temperatures. And that really is what drives GDUs. When we have those nighttime temperatures, 70, 72, that really adds to the GDU total. And of course, for corn, that does make it a little tougher, especially during the reproductive stages. If we've got nighttime temperatures above 70, a lot of times that will be burning the sugars that we've produced during the day. So that can be a detriment to ear fill. Fortunately, we've cooled down and nighttime temperatures at 50. So that will help give a chance for that corn to take all the energy, all the sunlight that it captured, and transfer those sugars into the ear, and hopefully not have to burn sugars at night. Looking at black layer dates, and pretty similar to, we started this 2 weeks ago, and hasn't changed too much, but for some of those April planting dates, we're looking at mid-September to the third week of September for black layer dates. And then on the right-hand side, we've got the frost, well, I should say freeze, because frost is really 28 degrees and above, just kind of tinging things. And freeze is the hard 28 degrees and below for 4 hours. So for Storm Lake, that happens to be the average of the 16th of October. And so you can see these percentages, 4 or 6% for the earlier planting dates, but even 20% for a 24th of April planting date as far as a freeze risk. And as we get into the mid-May and later planting dates, any sort of models we use are just really not accurate as far as predicting the chance of a frost. Obviously, it goes up, but I like looking at the silking date prediction for even this 6th of June planting. Was really just a couple days ago on Monday. And essentially you can take that, add 65 days roughly to give you your black layer date. So that's pushing it till about the 10th of October. Wouldn't be surprised if it's even a little longer than 65 days from the silking date. But either way, that's still a decent chance of beating the freeze, at least at Storm Lake, Iowa. Not even going to talk about, Paige, the dates that were planted, or the corn that was planted the 20th of June or the 25th of June. Just get on our knees and pray for those planting dates.
Right. Yeah.
So root lodging is something we've had, especially since last Monday night's storms. But I know you've seen a fair amount in your area, Paige.
Yeah, just getting a few calls as far as late last week to take a look at some fields. And as I was out and about digging around, in the back of my mind, I was thinking, well, maybe this is a corn rootworm situation. But this particular field was planted around that April 24th time frame. So when I went digging out there, the soils were super, super tight and compaction going on. You can see in that middle picture, there's just that chunk of hard soil restricting that root growth. So kind of what I found out there, the brace roots and then the main root system was having a hard time driving down and anchoring in. So it's just something in the back of your mind, it's we do our best every year. Growers do their best every year when it comes to planting, and this field could have been just a little wet, but we also have had a lot of pounding rains early on and even afterwards. So
yeah, I think the pounding rains in some areas, of course, where we've had water sit, some of that ground just it was lacking oxygen and did get hard, especially once the rains dried up for the most part. Then we turned hot and dry. And I think all along, Paige, we've been talking about our root system. Root balls are relatively small. We just didn't get that penetration early, as saturated as we were. So I think that was a factor in some of these cases. And it also comes down to timing. Just like green snap, you got plants that are more susceptible or very susceptible at that pre-tassel stage. Even with root lodging, you've got differences among hybrids as far as when they get those brace roots established. And we've seen some hybrids that have a good root system, but maybe are a little slow in getting the brace roots down. And if it catches it before that happens, of course, and if we're dealing with some hard soils at that surface, that can spell a disaster. I have seen some of these fields where they've straightened back up to some extent. But obviously, when you have root lodging after tasseling, you're still going to be dealing with that gooseneck. You're still going to be dealing with some issues as far as harvestability. What would you say, Paige, as far as effect on yield for some of this lodged corn?
I looked at the ears and everything, and they seemed filled out pretty good. There might be some situations where it could possibly be pulled back here or there, but as far as, the degree of lodging in this situation, there's 30% to almost 100% with those plants laying over. So we are going to hinder some photosynthesis with those plants underneath. I don't know an exact percentage, but there could be some stuff going on there as far as yields.
Yeah, and it is always tough to estimate anything on an exact percent. There's a lot of factors, and of course the amount of moisture we get from this point on, and really, to me, most of the issues with yield loss comes in harvestability issues or ear loss or stalk rot. So that's yet to be determined. I think the thing we've got going for us is a lot of times when we have root lodging, it can be more rootworm induced, like you had mentioned, but most cases we don't have that this year. And so, at least we've got roots that are a little better, a little healthier. Plus, we don't have some of the silk clipping. I've seen some of these cases with root lodging where we have pollination yet to occur, and if we've got silks that are hidden and or getting clipped, that just adds to any sort of yield loss. So I guess that's the positive to take away, that rootworm pressure overall is still relatively light, and so that should help in this scenario as well. So looking at just finishing out the year, we've got a ways to go, but both on corn and soybeans, the days till physiological maturity. We've got a lot of fields that are getting to that R4 or dough stage on corn. Certainly some in the R3 or milk stage, but once we're in the dough stage, we've got just over a month. And I would say a good month, of course. And this dough stage is considered, a hard dough. But as you look at the chart, and this is something that the last few years, especially, we've been concerned about when we're in these dry scenarios, how much water it actually needs to finish. And if we're in the dough stage, we still need 8 inches to get it to the finish line. And we're sitting at about 50% of the yield that's been attained, between 45 and 55%. And then, of course, as we go on down the road, once we start to see dent, typically we're 4 weeks off or just under a month to get to that black layer. And then, of course, we've got a little bit more of our yield attained. So right now, very critical stage, obviously, from dough to early dent, as far as the amount of yield, amount of starch that's being packed into those kernels. Really, you could say in the next 2 weeks, there's 25% of our yield that's being determined. And on the soybean side, we always know August is the soybean month, and chart like this really spells it out. We've got a lot of beans, R3 to R4, especially R4, where we've got a 3/4 inch pod at one of the top 4 nodes. At that point, wide range on beans as far as time it takes to get to maturity, depending on the heat as we get into R7. So we've really got a wide range, 37 to 51 days. On the water side, similar to corn, 9.5 inches yet to go, but only 20 to 30% of the yield has been attained at this point. So being able to fill pods, of course, being able to get the seed size that we need is really all in front of us. And even the fields that are at R5, when we're starting to get seed formation, we've still got 2/3 of the yield yet to be attained. So we know it. It just always kind of is a good reminder, and also why it's so important to make sure that the plant is healthy, aphids aren't bothering it from this point on. So Paige, you mentioned southern rust that you saw this morning. Yes, from your standpoint, how widespread has it been, and how serious you think it is?
The past, I would say, week and a half, I'm really starting to see it a little more. I wouldn't say it's extremely widespread. I can find it in particular hybrids that might not have the highest tolerance for it. It doesn't surprise me that we're seeing it this year. And we've had quite a few storms, southerly winds, and the hurricanes that we've been hearing about really push those spores up our way. But I have had a lot of questions. Early on, saw a lot of common rust, and as far as the differences between them, the southern rust, the pustules are mainly on the upper leaf surface. They can be in clusters. They're more light orange. It does really, really like warm temperatures. It does develop quicker than common rust. The pustules for southern rust are more, I'd say, circular and oval, whereas common rust are more oblong, darker, deep, like brick red. But something to think about. I mean, gosh, the last time I saw some southern rust really was, I'm gonna say, 4 years ago. I'm not seeing an extreme outbreak in the fields, but I can find it here or there.
Mhm. Yeah, and that's what I would say too. It's a rare one, and
Mhm.
usually takes those warmer temperatures, 80, 90 degrees, which we've had, and the high humidity. But typically you see it in the south, and that hurricane is a good point. A lot of times that's what it takes to really blow it up into our part of the world. Obviously doesn't overwinter, just like common rust, so the spores have to be blown in. And it's, in fact, it's rare enough that our hybrids from 102 day and earlier, we really don't even rate, or rarely do we rate, because it's just not a disease that they're going to face that often. But yeah, I would say that the other thing to help you keep it straight from common rust is that upper leaf surface is a key one, and then the color orange versus more of a brown for common rust. But I think of this as the Donald Trump disease. So if you walk a field that's got quite a bit of southern rust, you're going to come out looking orange. So one way to remember it.
Yep.
It's the political season, isn't it?
Yes, 'tis the season.
And then there's a good shot there. Yeah, one of those orange raised pustules that can really explode, like you mentioned, and take off very quickly.
Yep.
And then
common rust.
with the good close up of the common rust, that's more brown. And with common rust, hybrids overall have much better tolerance. So that's a factor that really helps us out. A little more nervous about southern rust versus common rust when it comes down to it. Mm-hmm.
No.
A few hybrids on the southern rust side, they're a little more susceptible. 5665 would be one, just to mention, and there's a few others too that are rated like a 6, or that's probably as low a rating as what we have. So that would be a hybrid to keep an eye on. And then our old friend tar spot, we had talked about before. We continue to see this expand. This is the map as of Monday from the Integrated Pest Management website, but officially now we do have O'Brien, Plymouth, BV counties. I know it's been spotted in Clay County. So we do have plenty of places around. And of course, when we've got it in all those counties, I'm sure we can find it in probably every county. I guess from what I've seen, it hasn't progressed a lot. Still is present, but it hasn't really moved up that plant. We had some guidelines in our last newsletter about where you start seeing that yield impact. And of course, a lot of factors go into that, and a lot of it has to do with what stage you're at, growth stage, and just the overall health of the plant. But continues to be out there, but still, I guess it hasn't moved a lot. But your thoughts on Paige?
Yeah, I'm just seeing this one a bit more as far as I get into fields this week and late last week. Again, mainly in that mid to lower canopy where that stomata is embedded into the leaf. I'm not finding much necrosis or whatnot. I was going to say we can add Pocahontas, Calhoun, Greene County to the list. Again, low levels. And Jim, we haven't had too much of an issue with this in both of our territories. I know it's kind of been a little more intense in eastern Iowa, but it really hasn't done anything until super late in the season where, there's no yield impacts. And I was visiting the other day as far as with a few counterparts and extension that has dealt with this for a while. So you see that leaf right there. It's green, it's got the black stomata, but then I have been getting pictures of like necrosis starting in that leaf. And in my mind, I feel like we should be okay as far as with just that stomata piece, but actually not. Both situations can cause yield loss. And what I've heard through my conversations around that 5% incidence, even with that stomata, like that leaf right there at that ear leaf, we could expect some yield loss. Not to be doom and gloom or anything. I feel really confident that we won't have too much of an issue. Like I said, it's just low levels out there is what I'm finding. And that lower canopy, like I mentioned earlier when we first started, when I walked in this cornfield back here, while yes, the grass is dewy, that dew is mainly in that mid to upper canopy right now. It was completely dry in that lower canopy.
Yeah, and you mentioned ear leaf and above. That is the key. I mean, that's the thing to really watch for at this point of the season, to see the progression. And, I guess the bottom line is, as far as making a fungicide decision, obviously getting a little bit late in corn, but there has been incidences in past years where, R4 applications or dose stage applications have benefited, especially from tar spot. So some of these fields, obviously, they're later planted. They're going to be more susceptible. Always a challenge to decide if you want to put the money into those late planted fields, but between tar spot and southern rust and a few of the other diseases present, certainly makes a case that we need to continue to scout and make decisions, especially on fields that are still in that R4 dose stage. So aphids, another thing as far as decisions yet. Been getting a fair amount of questions on this, and of course, questions are usually the whole thing with corn aphids. It's just not real well established thresholds, and of course, there's spotty, there's hot pockets. The guidelines you see in the slide are somewhat established, but it's still not great for thresholds. But basically 500 or more per plant. Just like diseases, colonies are at the ear or above. That's where the photosynthetic factory is, those top leaves. So that's what we want to protect. 80% of the field infested. We've got the sooty mold, which is very evident here in this picture on the left. Of course, if corn is under drought stress, it just can't handle as much for the aphid feeding. And then if we don't have predators, again, this picture on the left does show some of the mummified aphids. And so if we've got predators out there helping us, that makes me less likely to treat. And then, of course, the stage of growth, again, and not real well established on the threshold here, but once we start to get into early dent, especially if we're into the almost a full dent stage, then we're home free. But for most cornfields, even April planted, we're still, I would say, at least 10 days, if not 2 weeks off from from being home free on aphids. So again, another one that's tough to pull the trigger on, but we know what these can do as far as not only hurting yield, but hurting standability here late season.
In that particular field, the one with the sooty mold leaf, like you had mentioned, there's some mummified aphids, and that's due to parasitism. And then also I did find some lacewing larvae and some ladybugs. So those can all help, but definitely one of those, do a little scouting, see what you see out there.
Yep, absolutely. And same with aphids and soybeans, a little more established thresholds, but yeah, if you know that 72 to 77, that's kind of right where we're at. So I think they'll be enjoying it. Relative humidity, high, but not extreme. Actually, once we get into the very high humidities, you tend to see a little bit more of the fungi come in and actually help control aphids. So that's one of the reasons the high humidities work against them. But again, R5.5, R6 is when we need to be continuing to scout and treat for, knowing that if we're starting to get seed formation, we've got 1/8 of an inch seed in the top 4 nodes. We've got roughly 2 weeks yet to go on that. So not out of the woods by any means, and of course a lot of late planted soybeans that are going to be susceptible for a long time. We all know that, and it's the reality. Aphid in soybeans to me has been a little bit more hit and miss. I guess they probably have seen more in corn. So there's certainly hot pockets, but I'd say pressure has been overall still relatively light. But you certainly walk into a field or a spot in a field where they've loaded up. And then lastly, our spotlight product of the week, and would encourage everyone also to take a look at the chat. Once again, Nick Weber's been putting some good information in there. All kinds of stuff on soybean aphids, corn aphids, and growth stages. So spotlight product, one probably most of you are familiar with, one of our high volume products, 10533 as well as 10535. Just a powerhouse. The strengths on this hybrid have been emergence, late season plant health, stay green, overall good disease package, very good stock. If there's a caution, I would say the roots, and if you remember, we actually did back off the rating. It is a 4 rated on roots, so it is something to be aware of. Typically don't see many issues, but sometimes that brace root development is a little bit slower. So with a taller plant like it is, it can catch the winds.
Hey, Jim, not to interrupt, I do have it behind me if you want me to take everybody into the field quick, but you might have to unshare or quit sharing.
Well, yeah, why don't you do that? While you walk back there, I'll quick put up the last slide. So those that want to scan can do that. And then I will take it off the PowerPoint mode and switch it in so we can look at it live. That's always exciting, isn't it?
Yes. So yeah, I mean, this is definitely a key hybrid for all of us. Considered a big leafy green plant. I really, as far as the emergence, it is one of those hybrids that pretty dang quick out of the ground, and one that I get calls on the growers just like how uniform and quick that it comes out. But one of those broadacre type hybrids, as you see, big leafy, very healthy. I do have an ear here as far as, it's one of those big girthy blocky ears with some nice kernel depth on it. It's one of our favorites for sure.
Yeah, that blocky ear and of course gets a lot of its yield out of that kernel depth is key. So that's where the late season stay green, late season plant health really comes in handy, keeping it going all the way to black layer. Yeah, it looks pretty good in there. Glad you didn't get lost and find your way back out because it's a jungle.
I know. Exactly.
All right. Well, we are at 8:32, so going to wrap it up, but If there's other questions or comments from the group, certainly stay on for that. But otherwise, that is all we had this morning. Appreciate you being on, and Paige, appreciate you being live at the remote location. All right. Well, thanks everyone for being on. And as usual, we will send out the slides, the PDF slides, and that will also have the QR code in case you didn't get that scanned this morning.
Thanks, everybody. Be safe. Have a good day.